All right. Yes. So welcome to today. This was a fun presentation to work on for me just now. So I'm excited to present on it. And let me just open the chat so I can see that as well. All right. Yes. So like Katie said, my name is Alicia Donner, and I am one of the 4 Financial Empowerment Center counselors with the Pittsburgh Financial Empowerment Center. And so today, like Katie mentioned, and you guys all know from registering for this event, we're going to talk about managing debt. All right, so a little overview of today's discussion. We're going to have an icebreaker, one of my favorites, but I won't spoil that for you. And then talk about like the 3 steps to really like handling your debt and moving forward from it. So again, step 1, getting familiar with that debt, figuring out what you owe and where it's going. Step 2, using that information to strategize and then make a plan to pay down your debt. And then step 3, moving forward. And then we'll tie it up at the end with how the Financial Empowerment Center, the FEC, can offer help and ongoing support as you work to become debt-free. All right, so one of my favorite icebreakers we use a lot at the FEC for presentations is just what words or associations come to mind when you think about money. And feel free to drop stuff in the chat. I'm looking at it right now, and yeah, let everyone know what people think about when you think about money. Troubles, stress, yep. Definitely. I think that is a big thing. That's something I didn't realize I was gonna think about so much when I was a kid. It's just like how much money is stressing me out, and I think about it every day. Part of that is because I deal with money as my job and other people's feelings about money a lot every day. But even before this job, I thought about it a lot. Oh, like this, kind of thinking about barter systems and kind of sharing economies. From, is it Sheila? I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correct. Yeah, stability, security. Yeah, those are kind of more of the like positive attributes. Shayla, gotcha. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, kind of that stability and security, investments, long-term stability and security. Those are more of the positive aspects of having money and maybe having enough money. And then also kind of bringing it back to today, not having any debt, because, you know, that's usually just, those are your liabilities. We want to kind of work more with the asset side of money. All right, so we're talking about step 1, which is getting familiar with your debt. How much do you owe and who do you owe it to? And so I kind of like to view this as a 3-pronged process too. First things first, access your credit reports. The main place to do this is going to be annualcreditreport.com. You can also do it a variety of other ways, like you can sign up with the Experian app and get access to your Experian credit report monthly. That Experian app will also give you your score. You can also monitor your credit through Credit Karma that connects to both Equifax and TransUnion. But really the key place to go to get your full report and to get your full report for free weekly until the end of April 2022, which is due to the pandemic. They have offered additional credit reports. Usually it was only 1 every 12 months, but you know, you can get up to 52 a year instead of just 1. Really key thing here is also checking for accuracy. You want to be checking your credit reports at least once every 12 months, once a year for all 3, just to make sure there isn't anything that doesn't belong to you, or maybe a bill that went into collections because you moved or the like, and you can handle that as soon as you see it before it starts negatively affecting your credit. So that's like, this is a big first step. Next step, writing it all down. I would say this includes these 5 main areas. So balances, how much you owe, what the minimum payment is every month, the interest rates, those APRs, when it is due every month, because that'll especially relate to if you have to take it out of a different paycheck, or, you know, kind of strategizing about how to use your money all month. Due dates are really important there. And then the remaining term, that would be for those term loans, which are going to be like your student loans, your car loans, your mortgage. And then also break it down by type. So I have a question here. The two main types are secured and unsecured. What are the differences, or what is an example of a secured debt and what's an example of an unsecured debt? All right, don't all jump in at once. It's also okay to say, not sure. And I can tell a little bit more about the difference. But yeah, feel free to, you can pipe up if you don't mind like being recorded, or feel free to drop it in the chat. Okay, it is not related to interest, but that is a great guess. All right, I will give it a few more seconds. Anybody else want to be brave and hazard a guess? Again, I approve you, Dentasia, for, venturing out. Ooh, good. Yes, the difference between a mortgage and a credit card. So, and Angie also is kind of talking about that deposit. Yes. So secured debts are debts backed by a collateral. So that is going to be your mortgage, your car loan. That is something, if you stop making those payments, an asset can be seized by the bank to like recoup their loss, but you might even owe after that. Like if you get a car repossessed, you might end up owing money on the loan, even if the car is repossessed. A home, that's the foreclosure process. And then you might have the balance of your mortgage still on your credit report for 7 years after that. Unsecured debts like those credit cards, student loans, medical debt, there is no collateral. So even if you have to stop paying on those debts for, financial reasons, there's an emergency. We're going to talk a little bit later about triaging your finances and your budget. Even if you stop paying on those, you can get harassed for that money, but there is no asset they can seize to recoup on that investment. And even if you have to go through bankruptcy or the like, certain assets are usually held outside of bankruptcy, like your primary car and your primary residence. So again, unsecured debts, those are a little bit easier to work with when you're managing debt. If you get, especially those secured debts, like if it's a car you depend on, yeah, you were totally right. If it's a car you depend on for going to work, or a house you depend on to live in, you want to make sure you maintain those payments if you can. That's why we want to talk about the difference between that secured and unsecured debt. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in our kind of triaging process when you can't handle all of your bills. All right. So the second step is strategizing and making a plan. So how do you want to pay down your debt? And, can you do it as well? I think there's a lot of people who are like, well, I want that debt gone like yesterday, and that would be great, but usually it's going to be a bit of a longer process. So I kind of frame this part, I'm a kid of the 90s, as a choose your own adventure, slaying the debt dragon. So from this question, can you make at least the minimum payment on all your debts? Maybe even more. And this is where I want to emphasize the importance of the minimum payment. So on your credit card bills or your, okay, I hope I didn't, okay. My electricity just flickered, so I hope I'm still connected. Just wanted to let everyone know in case I get disconnected. But anyways, minimum payments are the minimum you need to make in order to keep everything current. It is okay to sometimes just be able to make those minimum payments. Like if you're experiencing income loss due to early part of the pandemic or the like, you want to be able to make at least the minimum payment, ideally more, especially for debts that are carrying interest, which are most of our debts. There are a couple instances where you might have a 0% loan, like maybe if you get a really good deal on your car, or you might have a really low interest rate. But no matter what, for most debts, you're going to be paying interest. But we want to make at least the minimum payment and, see if you can potentially pay more. So the first step is, if you can, moving forward there. But what I really like to emphasize here is, are you sure you can? Because sometimes it's easy to think you can pay the debts. And then once you've written everything down and you add it all up and realize it's more than your monthly income, then you might have to rethink those things. And this is where something we do a lot at the FEC, tracking your spending and building a budget from that spending, is really key. That's not something we'll talk about necessarily today, but it is really the foundation of financial empowerment, is figuring out what money is coming in and where it's going, and seeing if those budget or, like balance, or at least, how much is coming in is equal to or more than what's going out. Also, like if you are struggling with that tracking and staying within your means, you can meet with the FEC for ongoing support. But if you think about that, asking, are you sure, and are still feeling good, we can go onward. And this is where kind of the two popular methods of paying off debt when you are able to make at least the minimum payments comes in. Has anyone heard of these methods, the Snowball method and the Avalanche method? Okay, no. And that's totally okay. I can give you a little brief rundown. Okay, got a yes. So I got one in each category so far. All right. So the main difference here is Snowball method focuses on the balance owed in each of your debt categories. So when you make that list and you make how much you owe on your 5 credit cards and how much you still owe on your car and your student loans, with the Snowball method, you're going to start paying down the lowest balances first. And this is all about kind of the psychology of small wins and gaining momentum. And that's kind of why it's called the Snowball method. You start with a little bit and then it gains momentum as you go. And so what you'll do, this is really popular with Dave Ramsey, you list all of your debts, starting with the lowest balance. You're not really caring about what the interest rate is or the like. And then what you'll do is you'll pay the minimum on all your debts. Again, that's really important for keeping things all like hunky-dory, as it were. And then any excess you can pay towards debt goes towards that smallest balance. And then once you pay off that smallest balance, you go to the next highest balance and then continue on until you're debt-free. The other way you can do this is focusing on the Avalanche method, which focuses on APR. So you'll focus on the debts that have the highest APR, because that's where you're going to get the most bang for your buck. However, this can be a little bit harder psychologically because it doesn't have those nice small wins built into it, but it does potentially save you more money in the long run. But there have been studies that have showed that like they kind of work out to be about the same as far as efficacy works. But the Snowball, it has better staying power because of that momentum. Jane, talking about the home equity line of credit, hold that till the end. So we'll come back to that. But again, so going back to the Avalanche, this is what focuses on APR. So with the Snowball, you organize your debts by lowest balance, focus on that lowest balance first. With Avalanche, you organize your debts by APR and focus on that highest APR first, and then pay that off and then work on the next highest interest rate. All right, but the flip side, what if you are not able to pay at least the minimum payments on all your debts? That is totally okay. It is really easy to get in over your head and kind of be stuck in a debt spiral, just spinning your wheels in interest. I will say I have been there, especially with credit card debt I accrued in my mid-20s, just was not using those credit cards wisely, which we will talk about a little bit later. So I just want to let you know, even if you are having trouble making those minimum payments, it's okay. But it is really important to recognize that as soon as you can. You still have options even if you can't pay your debt in full. And the FEC can help here too. We sometimes like what we like to do is, for maybe your first attempt at calling a credit card, to ask for a lower payment or a change in your due date or potentially a lower interest rate or entering a debt repayment plan with them. We can help you. We can be on the phone with you and kind of help you build the confidence to make those calls on your own. And yeah, we can talk about negotiating payment plans and settlements. So again, this happens. Life happens. I don't think any of us knew that this giant pandemic was going to be coming in 2019 and that it would really upend our lives. These things happen. Job losses happen. Medical emergencies happen, lots of things. So it is okay to not be able to make those minimum payments, but it's good to admit that to yourself early so you can move forward and get out of debt as fast as possible. So if you do find yourself struggling with debt, here are some steps you should do, kind of along with getting a clear picture of your debt. Let's talk about how we can strategize to really get a handle on your debt. So first things first, we talk about this a lot at the FEC, is minimizing your expenses. So maybe you have cable, maybe you can lower that. And it doesn't have to be forever. It can be a short-term sacrifice for a long-term gain. Maybe you cut cable for 6 months, a year, but you can bring that back. Or maybe you realize, like, I can live without this expense. Another thing we talked about a lot, especially early in the pandemic, when people were furloughed or businesses were closed and people were just very much in shock and didn't have income, is triaging your budget. Thinking about those needs versus wants. And I know my colleague Kristen will be giving a presentation on credit and reading a credit report soon. She'll probably talk about the needs versus wants. We often talk about it a lot, but this is kind of where, like we talked about a little bit more, and this connects into those prioritizing debts, paying your secured debts over your unsecured debts. Make sure you pay for those things you need to survive, your rent or mortgage, your car note, especially if you use that car to get to work, school, doctor's appointments, etc. The food you need, the utilities you need to keep heat on in your house or keep internet. So maybe you can work remotely or go to school remotely. Those are the important things you want to prioritize. And then you work on trimming down those things that are nice, but not necessary. So maybe you won't be able to go out for coffee as often as you have. But again, this is a short-term sacrifice for a long-term gain. And also, we don't want to say you can't do those things ever again or at all, but maybe you just have to moderate it more. Like for me, I know dining out, and that's a big issue for a lot of us FEC counselors. I had that spending was out of control. So I had to really think about how it related to my long-term goals, and should I maybe bring down my dining out spending and have that sacrifice because I want to get out of my consumer debt faster. So now I try to eat out maybe just once a week instead of 4 or 5 times or the like. But again, it's that short-term sacrifice for a long-term gain. I know it's really important for me to no longer have credit card debt. All right, another thing, and this is where it is important to, take the wool off of your eyes and really get a clear picture of what you owe sooner, and ask for help as soon as you can. This I get is really hard. It's often embarrassing to say I'm in debt and I can't pay it. There are lots of issues, but it's really important to ask for help as soon as you think there's going to be a struggle. Don't put your head in the sand and think it's just going to blow over. This is pretty common with student loan debt. And student loan debt is one of the easiest debts to manage because, especially federal student loans, they have a program called the income-driven repayment program, where your payments could be as low as $0 a month, and that counts as a minimum payment and keeps your credit good. So that's something where it's really good to act fast if you're experiencing an income change or some kind of emergency. Talk to your creditors. That's another place where the FEC can help. We can call together. I get that it's embarrassing and stressful and really hard. There are lots of negative feelings around money, like we talked about, but it is always important to do it as soon as possible before your credit has taken a hit, or you've been hit with late fees, or your creditor is no longer willing to work with you because you haven't paid for several months. Creditors are much more willing to work with you if you reach out to them early. All right. And it's also important to kind of know your options for dealing with debt. So first thing you can do is negotiate directly with your creditors. A lot of credit card companies have in-house hardship plans. You can talk to them about a payment plan. If you have a medical debt or maybe another debt from like a telecommunications company that's gone into collections, you might be able to settle that debt for less than the full balance, or start a payment plan with them that will eventually settle that debt for less than the full balance. These are options, definitely, like we can talk about, and I can help you call your creditors to work on that. Another thing is a more formal debt restructuring. Whereas negotiating directly with creditors is, you entering into a contract with the credit card company directly. A more formal plan is where you might work with another company to help you manage your debt. So this includes debt management plans through a nonprofit credit counseling agency, or debt consolidation loans through a bank or nonprofit. And two, I want to draw everyone's attention to here is Advantage Credit Counseling Service, which, full disclosure, is where the FEC counselors are employed. And it's also the main credit counseling agency in Western PA. Advantage has a national footprint, but they manage debt management plans in the Pittsburgh region. And a debt management plan is where you enter into a formal relationship with Advantage and you pay them, and then they pay your participating credit cards. And because they have the power of being a group and negotiating for lots of people who owe, they're able to get you a much lower interest rate. I believe so. I know the name has changed. It's been Advantage since I was employed. There was a question in the chat of, is that what used to be called consumer credit counseling? I believe so. I think, and also just like the general idea of credit counseling, Advantage is a part of the National Association of Credit Counseling Agencies, and offers that kind of, dealing with your debt that way. Again, they can, negotiate much lower interest rates that can be as low as like 2% for some creditors. There are often a participation fee in the state of Pennsylvania. It's maxes out at $50 per month. And that is kind of just a service fee for participating in the program. But for a lot of people who are kind of spinning their wheels, swimming in, over 20% interest rates, they can bring their interest rates down to below 5%, as low as 2%. That $50 a month, in order to get out of debt in the maximum amount of time is 5 years, 60 months, it might be worth it. And also, you only have to pay if you decide to enroll in a program. I know, it's hard. There was a question in the chat about they used to be free. I know, it's unfortunately we have to pay for staff. There's been some other legal things where money coming in has changed. So yeah, it's unfortunate that things are not as cheap as they used to be. And I just like to be frank that there are some costs, but that the service fee can sometimes be waived. I think the one fee that cannot be waived is the $50 to enroll in the program. But even so, you can get a free credit counseling session without signing up for the program. That is a possibility. It's also nice to, potentially just talk to another professional. Like, you can talk to an FEC counselor, but you can also talk to a credit counselor and just get, a second opinion. There's nothing wrong with doing that. Another organization I really like, which kind of talks about the debt consolidation loans, is the Hebrew Free Loan Association of Pittsburgh. They offer 0% loans to people in I believe, Allegheny County or the adjoining counties, up to $10,000. 0% interest for $10,000, and it can be offered for a variety of things, including debt consolidation. They are really a hidden gem in the Pittsburgh region because that is a great way to get out of debt. To have a 0% an interest-free loan and potentially pay back a $10,000 loan in under 3 years, that's amazing. So that's something you can consider. Also, a lot of banks offer debt consolidation personal loans. Yes, so another good question is that it used to require that you have a cosigner who owns property. That has changed. You still most likely require a cosigner, though they can be flexible depending on a person's situation. So this is another place where I encourage my clients to reach out, and they no longer require that cosigner to own property. And that cosigner doesn't have to live in the region. It just needs to be a Pennsylvania resident. But yeah, so it's another good option. And I know people who've used several of the Hebrew Free Loan loans, and also, you know, have not been affected by having to go back for another debt consolidation loan. They are willing to help people and just want to continue helping people in our region. And here I do like to offer a little bit of a warning. Be wary of for-profit debt settlement and credit repair. Those usually cost a lot. And especially for debt settlement, they encourage you to stop paying your debts right away, which can potentially hurt you, will tank your credit score right away. It'll go down as much as over 100 points. And you pay them to administer this plan, as well as like paying into a savings account which they then use to settle with all of your creditors. But that's not maybe the best option for everyone. And it's also good to just know, like, what are you paying for upfront? And ask a lot of questions before you do that. Same thing with credit repair. There might be some things going on where they're just flooding your collectors with mail that they can't open. And so then a trade line gets removed from your credit report. And yes, I will, another question coming up about a lot of information on this PowerPoint. I will be sending it over after the presentation. So I think then somebody at HSCC can send it out to everyone who attended today. So we can definitely send it out. Yes, heart back to you, Queen Goddess Telena. All right. But yeah, it's just important to be wary before you sign on the dotted line for something. And then there is always the option of bankruptcy. This does offer a clean slate, but it should be really for very dire circumstances. It has a longer and more structured impact on your credit, like preventing you from buying a mortgage within the next 2 to 4 years. There are also restraints if you filed a bankruptcy recently, that sort of thing. We also like to say at the FEC, we are not lawyers, so I can't give you specific legal advice related to bankruptcy, but it is good to know it is an option and it is there to help people. I know going through a bankruptcy is hard. There's a lot of emotions involved, but sometimes it is your best option if debts are really taking over your life and it's untenable, that's what it's there for. Someone very close to me, my great aunt, had to file bankruptcy in the 90s due to medical debt. Very common in the United States. Also common after a divorce, those big life-changing things where it's just things get out of control really fast and just are too much for you to handle. And that's what bankruptcy is there for. It's there to help you get out of those dire situations and get a fresh start, a clean slate. All right, and then step 3, moving forward. Again, this is a big thing here too. Like, you know what? Do what you love, which I would love to no longer be paying credit card interest. So debt-free is definitely a goal for me. So we're going to talk about implementing your plan and staying out of debt in the future. So key things here. Getting out of debt is usually a long road. It's not a sprint. You got to stay focused. And also I'm going to emphasize this a lot because we talk about it a lot at the FEC. Stay on top of tracking your spending. That's how you work with a budget. Tracking your spending is how you build a budget and also how you make sure you're staying within that budget. And so it's important to know that. Another thing you got to do, especially during this marathon of getting out of debt, is celebrating your progress, both the small things and the large things. So I'm assuming if people on this call are struggling with debt, any thoughts on what you guys want to do when you are debt free? feel free to drop those things in the chat. I know I'm going to do something that seems really boring to me. Yes, good, stay debt free. But for me, I'm probably going to save more, which again feels very boring to younger Alicia, but now feels like the epitome of security to adult Alicia. Oh, I like that. Yeah, you know, kind of live how you want and not be chained by debt. Yeah, there you go. That's right. You can save to invest in a business and own property. And you can also, you know, there are sometimes you might be able to do them both at the same time. Yep. Save more and pay payments on time. Yeah, really good things. Another thing, kind of talking about, you know, starting a business and potentially buying property. Something else that can be challenging is you want to get rid of debt before you start working on your next project, which might be saving for retirement or the like. But something we like to talk about at the FEC is a little bit more of a both and approach rather than an either or. So maybe think about, you're gonna, you know, you're working on paying down your debt, you should still be saving, which kind of leads me into the next part, which is how to stay debt free and stuff you should work on. Even when you are dealing with some debt, you wanna build an emergency fund. This is a big thing. A lot of, like I've been saying a lot, one of the main reasons people get into debt in the first place is some sort of emergency that they weren't prepared for and that they had to borrow for. So this is where building an emergency fund is so important. And you can start really small, you know, saving $1 a month, $5 a month, getting to maybe a goal of $250 or $500 or $1,000. That's another big thing that Dave Ramsey is really into, is your $1,000 emergency fund. So that's really key to financial stability, is having that emergency fund and using it when you have an emergency, which I get is also hard. It's sometimes easy to be like, well, I don't want to touch my savings because, you know, then I won't have it anymore. But it's there, so you don't have to go into debt because you have a car repair or a medical emergency. So you want to borrow from the bank of yourself, which is your emergency fund, and then pay yourself back and then continue working on that, getting out of debt. Or, you know, maybe you have dreams of becoming a homeowner, or you know, want to get a car because it'll just help make your life easier. We at the FEC can kind of talk about balancing those options together. Like, okay, let's work on creating a sustainable debt plan while also saving for a goal. Like maybe you'll direct some of that money towards savings. You want to, you know, like sometimes it'll take you years to get out of debt, but you still have to live your life with that debt. So how can you make things sustainable and kind of work towards other goals? So another thing we talk a lot about at the FEC is utilizing credit wisely. Key thing here, working to only spend what you know you can pay off in full each statement, or even paying it off multiple times a month. That's something a lot of people do to make it so it's not as big a hit when the bill is due, or you know, that you're, you know, carrying a balance or the like. Another thing that is a common misconception is that you need to carry a balance on your credit card. You don't. That is a lie for the credit card companies to get money. You really just need to use your credit card in order to have good credit. Really, you can have good credit without paying any interest. And that's what we like to see. You know, who wants to pay more for something than they've already paid? Or, you know, you might be worried that you're like, you know what? I can't have a credit card right now, or I can't have a line of credit because I know I'll just spend and I'm not responsible enough yet. That is totally fine. You can still, you know, use credit in order to maintain your credit score for a future purchase or the like by putting a bill on your credit card, maybe something you're already paying for with your debit or checking account, like your cell phone bill. You can route it through a credit card and then pay it off. You can even like cut up the card or leave the card at home so you are not tempted to use it. But that's a great way to still be building credit without spending more. You're already paying for it. You're just kind of routing it through the credit system. And another thing, kind of talking about, you know, saving for some goals. delaying gratification. So maybe you want a new pair of shoes or something that you might be tempted to just buy on credit in the past. Instead of thinking about borrowing in the moment because you really want it, thinking about saving for it over several months. That's a great way to just start staying debt-free. Delay that gratification. Use some other practices you've learned here today or have learned at the FEC to kind of help you stay out of that debt cycle, because it's really easy to get in debt and then stay in debt, and really we want to avoid it if we can. All right, and then this ties into how the FEC can help. We, as the FEC counselors, we help you look at your whole financial picture and think through your options as you look at what goals you want to achieve. So here are some major ways we help. Accountability partner. It's an outside expert who is there to help you, talk through things and help you realize okay, I need to stop this behavior, but I know it's going to be hard for me. You can have an accountability partner in us. My colleague, Kristen, had a no spending at Goodwill goal with a client in July. My colleague, failed that no spending at Goodwill, but her client was successful in non-spending at Goodwill in July. And we can have that relationship and, help you work through these things. Also connect you to resources like a debt management plan through Advantage or a Hebrew free loan, or also giving you the expertise to kind of weigh different debt consolidation loans through several banks. Continued ongoing support. Again, that accountability, that expertise, someone to bounce ideas off of. And then ultimately, something we're really excited about here, and I love seeing my little financial empowerment birds fly out of the nest and be really great, is the empowerment to allow you to succeed on your own. You can take what you've learned at the FEC and continue to apply it to different situations and continue to live your life debt-free. And so this is a fun picture of me and one of my former clients. Speaking of a client who has since left the nest, she was one of the winners of, this is right before the pandemic, so this is February 2020. She won $200 through the Pittsburgh Saves Initiative, which was in 2020, and encouraged people to sign up for savings. Another thing we like to connect to our clients a lot about is Fund My Future, which is for anyone with children out there. If you're actively saving for your children, even if it is a small amount, just $1 a month, you can be entered in monthly raffles, which include a prize of up to $1,000. So that's a great way to encourage a saving for children, and can also potentially, have you earn additional money. So it was really fun to get to celebrate with Katie, her winning that money. All right, so that was my rundown on debt. Any questions? I know we put a pin in one about HELOCs. And so Jane, I believe you asked about HELOCs. What were you specifically curious about with the HELOC, with the home equity line of credit, which is what that stands for? And you can feel free to speak up or put it in the chat. Also, if anyone else has any questions. Oh, I gotcha. It doesn't seem to work like regular credit. Yes, so a HELOC, and I think this might be connected to the secured, unsecured question is, so a home equity line of credit is, essentially like a large credit card, and you're able to get that credit because you have equity in your home. So it's a little bit like a secured debt. So the same thing, like if you potentially defaulted on your home equity line of credit, your home could potentially be seized to pay for what you owe. So there is a danger there because you are leveraging equity that you have put into your home to borrow more, which is why it's a nice resource for things like home repairs. Sometimes people use that also for starting up a business. Also, this is a dangerous thing people sometimes do, maybe refinancing their mortgage or the like to pay off credit card debt. That is a very tricky situation because you're turning unsecured debt, credit cards, into secured debt, and now your home is on the line. So that while that is something you can do, it's not often recommended because you're essentially turning something that you could easily get rid of in bankruptcy into something that is now attached to an asset that you would like to keep, most likely. So yes, HELOCs, yeah, they're not like a regular unsecured card. They're a secured debt because they are connected to the equity in your home. All right, any other questions? All right. Good question about student loans. So in the state of Pennsylvania, there are, I believe, only a few types of debt that can garnish your wages and seize your assets in your bank accounts, including student loans. The other are like alimony, child support, tax liens, that sort of thing. So student loans, federal student loans specifically, not private student loans, can garnish your wages and can potentially seize other assets, liquid assets like a bank account. So that's something, if you are experiencing this, like your wages are being garnished, your tax returns, your tax refunds are being seized, that sort of thing, what you can do, that means your student loans are most likely in default, definitely delinquent. You can rehab your student loans or consolidate them out of default, and then put them on an income-driven repayment plan, and that will stop the wage seizure once you are, once you've entered that rehabilitation program or have consolidated your loans out of the default and are on an IDR plan. But they can seize your assets like that. So if that is happening, that's something we work with a lot at the FEC, is getting student loans on rehabilitation programs to help you get more in control of your student loans, especially because there are a lot of options for dealing with student debt. Unlike, credit cards and like, especially if you already are in default, student loans, it's easier to work with them because they have very formal programs for that. Oh, another good question. So yeah, Queen Goddess, you should totally talk to the FEC, which leads me to my next slide. We'll also be emailing this out. An IDR plan is an income-driven repayment plan. So that is when a student loan plan is capped at 10 to 20% of your disposable income, which I believe is your AGI. There's a weird formula there, but it does make your student loans more affordable if you have student loan debt. All right, Angie is talking about secured credit cards. So this is a great question. We work with a lot of clients in getting a secured card and managing a secured card for sure. So Angie, we can definitely talk more about this at an FEC session, but some of the things I would consider here is with your secured credit cards, do they have any sort of routine review process where they might graduate to a regular card? So I know like Key Bank offers a secured credit card where they review your account every 6 months. And then if you have used the card well, you'll graduate to a regular unsecured credit card and get your security deposit back. And then you can just keep that card open as a bank credit card into the future. Discover Card does the same thing after 8 months. And going back to the secured credit card, both of those options don't have annual fees. So something to consider with a secured credit card is they often have annual fees. So maybe you have a credit card that has an annual fee and it has helped your credit. So maybe, like consider that annual fee, call them and see if they offer a different card that you might be able to transfer to without an annual fee. But if they say no and your credit score has gone up, it might be worth applying for a different credit card, either through your bank or one of the big name ones, especially if you have a higher credit score now, you will be more likely to get one of those that doesn't have an annual fee. And then you can open that card, close your secured credit card that has an annual fee, and you'll have, your credit history will be shortened a little bit, but you'll be moving forward with a more affordable card. So that's something I like to consider with secured credit cards. If it has a fee, maybe weigh the pros and cons and consider getting a card without a fee, and that can be your longest history card. We can definitely talk more in depth about that at an FEC session with me or one of my colleagues. So when should a person consider filing for bankruptcy? This is a tricky situation. And this is something where definitely meeting with an FEC counselor and especially a credit counselor might be just a way to help you get some more clarity, as well as working on tracking your spending and seeing how much you have to spend in order to survive each month, and kind of what is your bare bones budget. There isn't really, like with so much in personal finance, there isn't like one correct answer for everyone. It's really personal and really depends on your values, your personal situation, that sort of thing. So unfortunately, there's not a, this is exactly when you should do X, Y, or Z. Really depends on how you feel about it. You know, if you've had a previous bankruptcy in the past, and, you know, kind of weighing the pros and cons of it. And that's something where the FEC can definitely help you think through those things and help you, you know, just figure out those things. Because it's definitely a weighty decision, and you want to think about those pros and cons. You can also, even before you start filing a bankruptcy, it might be worth, you know, seeing if there is a bankruptcy attorney you would be able to talk to for a half an hour after you've talked with us and maybe had an idea of like what your debt to income ratio is in that, and get that legal opinion from a lawyer, because that's another key factor with this, especially because it is a legal issue and we are not lawyers. All right, this is another tricky one, like going back to school if you are in debt. So similar thing of, I think there's sometimes this desire to, you know, maybe be completely out of debt before you buy a house or buy a car or go into more debt. But that might not always be possible. And like you said, sometimes you need to go back to school in order to achieve your future success. You need a master's degree to work in your field or the like. I think there are ways to kind of do both. Again, it doesn't have to be this either or. Let's do a both and. I think the example of retirement is a key one. Like if everyone waited till they were completely out of debt before they started saving for retirement, you wouldn't be able to retire because you would have started too late. So it's really about leveraging both. And so kind of thinking about you're like, how much is school going to cost? How much are my loan payments going to be after I get out? Will that be affordable for my future earnings from my job? Will it help me achieve my goals? These are all things we can talk through at the FEC. And also, like I said, with the bankruptcy question, it's a very personal decision. I think for a lot of people, like you have to have a both and, like working on savings, even while you're paying down debt. That's important for like your emergency fund, or, you know, maybe you want to still travel while you're dealing with debt. Maybe you can't travel as often, but maybe, you know, you can do a trip every couple of years. That's okay. It's about balancing and kind of doing that both and in a really responsible way. That's a great way to deal with debt, just because it's a reality for a lot of us. And how can we, you know, avoid going into debt with that trip example? Like maybe you'll save up so you can pay cash for that cruise or whatever while you're still paying down debt. So you're not going into more debt to travel, you're saving, leveraging that savings, delayed gratification to be responsible, still living your life while still being responsible and making sure you can make those minimum payments and still celebrating those, you know, small and big wins there. So it is a very personal decision. I will say I had student loan debt from undergrad before I went to grad school, got some more debt. I am managing it well. And it was worth it for me because it allowed me to get this job and get really excited about financial education. It is very much a personal decision and involves a lot of weighing of pros and cons. All right, any other questions?
Alicia, we had a question from the registration form that said, how do you handle debt if you are divorced and there are past bills and collections in both of your names?
Okay, that is definitely a tricky question. And that might be something, in my understanding, through the divorce, your financial lives should have been split up more clearly than that. That might be an issue you will have to touch base with whoever the lawyer which handled your divorce. because that is definitely tricky waters, especially if the marriage has been dissolved, because those things should have been separated out, just like, the ownership of any shared assets like a home or the like. So tricky situation that I think is going to have to involve that legal aspect just because of the divorce being a legal proceeding. So I'm sorry I can't give you a good FEC question on that. We can definitely help you, maybe figure out what you want to talk to your divorce attorney about by looking over your credit report and kind of going through it with a fine-tooth comb to see, okay, these are the debts that are technically in both of our names. I need to talk to my lawyer about that. But as far as a plan forward, I think it will definitely involve getting connected with that attorney, because those things should have been separated as part of the divorce. Right. And I will definitely send over this PowerPoint. It's a lot of information, has our contact information. And just any other questions. Again, if you have more personal questions or just want, to know something more specific, that's what the FEC is here for. We can have a good relationship. I will say our first session with the FEC, it's like a first doctor's appointment. So it takes about 90 minutes because we're gathering a lot of information, intake form, all of that. But we do kind of touch on all of these things when we go through that session, go through your money tracker, which it is okay for that first session, if you haven't been tracking your expenses, to have estimates of how much you think you're spending on groceries or the like. And we also pull your credit through experience, so we can see what debts are reported there as well. And then we can kind of make a plan for moving forward. And the FEC, like I said, is there as an accountability partner to help you figure out how you're going to deal with your debt and work towards your goals at the same time. Right.
I'll just pop on here also. I do want to say as we wrap up, thank you everyone for attending. So we will send out the PowerPoint and also a link to the recording, which will be hosted on YouTube. So you can refer back to the materials at any time. Feel free to share them with any of your friends who may also benefit from this information. That email will also have a link for a survey where we just ask for some feedback, how Alicia did, what other questions you might have, what you'd like to see a presentation on in the future. Anyone who completes that survey and leaves us contact information, you can be entered to win a $50 Walmart gift card. So something that can help your budget go a little farther if you win that. But are there any final questions before we wrap up our event today?
Yes, I have one. So I asked the credit card, I think, to settle some debt of mine, and they told me that they didn't have any more money left for that. I never knew that was a thing of a money pit that they, have, and it can potentially be used up. But I personally feel like they saw that I was making my minimum payments on time, and I don't know, basically want to milk me for more. It was like during COVID, I had this amount saved, pay off this, and they said, well, no, we have no more money left. And I'm like, I never knew that. That was new information.
So I'm not sure I follow. So, so I think you were you owed them money, you had an account with them and you asked to settle it for a lower amount?
Yeah.
Okay. And they were saying no because they wanted the full amount?
No, they were saying they didn't have any more money left. That's their words. So I was like, I was saying that's interesting because that was news to me. I didn't even have any more words. Personally, I also was the one, I was paying and I still am paying my minimum balance on time every month. And it could have been because I am paying my balance on time every month, no, I'm not going to settle with you. But if I wasn't paying my balance on time every month, okay, let's settle. But then that's also mess up your credit.
Exactly. It is
Okay.
very much a double-edged sword. And that's where something like maybe getting out of that, dealing with that credit card company might be an option. I didn't mention this so much, but this can be some way you can kind of leverage getting out of credit card or getting out of relationship with one credit card, is the balance transfer method. There's usually an associated fee, opening a new credit card for that. But that's sometimes a way to, get some 0% interest time to pay on a loan or the like. And that's something I have done, because I'm like, I'm not satisfied with the customer service I've had with this credit card or the like. I'm going to take my business elsewhere. Same with if you get a debt consolidation loan, that's essentially saying, you know what, I am done with you, X, Y, and Z bank. I am not satisfied with your services. So I am, choosing to pay off this debt with a different method. That's kind of you leveraging your buyer power to kind of get out of their clutches. But yeah, like you said, and this is kind of an annoying truth of the credit card game and just debt collection in general. They're like, well, if you're able to pay the minimum payments, we're not going to work with you until you go into some sort of delinquency, which is really frustrating because like you said, that affects your credit. Similar thing with collection agencies, if they sell your debt right as it's going to go off your credit report, and just then it ends up getting reported for longer than it's supposed to be. Yeah, these credit card companies and debt collection agencies are not known for being the most above board. And so you kind of have to really weigh your options and kind of think about okay, had a rough experience here. I'm going to make sure I avoid that in the future. Or how can I, maybe get away from company A and go to company B while working towards becoming debt free. All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, I don't see any more questions in the chat. So thank you so much for presenting to us today. This was a lot of really great information, and I even wrote down notes for myself. So
there you go.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for presenting to us.
Yeah, no problem. And yeah, I will include my contact information. I know I didn't put it on the presentation, but yeah, people can feel free to reach out to me from that as well. If you want to just share my email and my phone numbers for work, we can, have people contact me that way as well.
Awesome. Well, thanks again. And everyone, please just stay on the lookout for that email with our survey and then the follow-up materials.
Thanks again for being a great audience. It was great to speak with you today.